The needle was already drawn. He was 5 minutes from death. And still, the bobcat was staring at the child through the rain. Not moving, not blinking, just watching him, like it had chosen this face to be the last thing it ever saw. The shelter worker didn't notice. She was too busy tapping her clipboard, checking the time. One injection, a quiet goodbye. That's what today was supposed to be. But the child had wandered in, silent, barefoot, wearing a dinosaur t-shirt soaked from the storm, with a half-eaten cookie melting in his hand. And somehow, the bobcat lifted its head. Everyone said it couldn't move, that the tranquilizer had done its job, that the pain had shut everything down inside it, all instinct, all memory. But it lifted its head anyway. For him, its golden eyes locked onto the boy's, not wild, but wide, searching, begging. And then something happened that no one could explain. The child dropped the cookie and walked straight into the kennel. He didn't flinch when his foot stepped into the puddle of blood, didn't pause when the bobcat's breath rattled with pain. He simply sat down, cross-legged, knees to chest, and began to hum a quiet tune into the dark. It wasn't a lullaby. It wasn't even a song. Just a broken little sound that filled the cold, wet air between them. The bobcat didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth. Instead, it leaned forward, inches, then centimeters, until its bloodied nose was resting near the boy's knee. No one had taught the boy how to sit with a dying thing. No one told him that wild animals weren't supposed to trust children. But somehow in that room, with thunder rolling outside and fluorescent lights flickering above, something ancient passed between them. And when the shelter worker came back with the needle, she found them like that. A child in silence, a bobcat still breathing, and a choice no one expected to question. No one moved them. The shelter worker stood at the door with the needle still in hand, her mouth slightly open, unable to speak. A second staffer came to look, then a third, but none of them stepped forward, because the boy didn't notice them, and the bobcat didn't acknowledge them. They were locked in something no one else could touch. Eventually, the door was left open. Quietly, rain tapped gently on the tin roof as evening rolled in like a heavy coat, soft and gray. The fluorescent light above buzzed, faded, then went out. No one tried to turn it back on. Inside the kennel, the child's knees were muddy. His shirt was soaked through. The bobcat's breathing had slowed, but it was still there. That faint rise and fall against the soaked floor, steadying itself to the rhythm of the child's presence. Every few minutes, the boy would hum. The same uneven sound, quiet, not musical, more like the memory of a tune than a tune itself. He would look at the bobcat's face, then down at its paw. Once, he reached forward and gently set the injured leg in place, almost like tucking in a blanket that had come loose. And the animal let him. By the time the last shelter worker locked the front gate and left the barn behind, the child and the bobcat were still there, lit only by the moody dusk coming in through a high window. Somewhere in the hills behind the shelter, a storm moved off. Mist began to form in the trees, and in the quiet that followed, the world shifted just a little. Not loudly, not visibly, but enough that something new had started. Morning came with bird song and the low rumble of trucks in the distance. A woman arrived early to check on the overnight holds. When she peeked into the back room, she expected to find what everyone assumed, an empty kennel. The boy would have been taken home, the bobcat handled. Instead, she found a trail of wet cookie crumbs leading to the closed kennel door. Inside, a child asleep, curled gently beside a wildcat still breathing. Not moving, not speaking, but alive. Together, the woman didn't open the gate. She sat down quietly on a crate across the room, pulled her coat around her shoulders, and watched them. Not like a worker, like a witness. Around 9 a.m., someone called the boy's mother. Around 9:20, she arrived, breathless and angry, then speechless when she saw him. Not harmed, not crying, but still there, sitting quietly beside the bobcat, now awake enough to lift its head when the door opened. A decision was supposed to be made that morning, but it wasn't. Instead, they placed the bobcat under Paw's hold. No sedation, no procedure. Just waiting. The boy came back that evening. And the next after that. It became a pattern no one planned. One child, one dying animal, and a bond that neither science nor policy could explain. Each evening he arrived barefoot, with something small in his hand, a leaf, a toy car, a drawing. He never gave them to the bobcat. He just shared them, holding them up, setting them beside him, placing them in the space between them. The bobcat began to sit up, then crawl, then drag its body to the corner where the boy waited. Still in pain, still fragile, but alive. And then one night, it didn't stop at the corner. It limped slow and trembling, all the way to the front of the kennel, and placed its head, heavily, carefully, against the bars nearest the boy's face. And the boy, just as gently, pressed his forehead to the other side. No words, no rules, just breath, and trust, and something the wild never forgets. The third week began with fog, heavy white, thick as cotton, draping the shelter grounds in silence. Most animals stirred restlessly that morning, barking, pawing at their cages. But not the bobcat. He was calm, still, waiting. When the child entered, damp hoodie, grass-stained knees, and a crumpled drawing in his hand, the bobcat rose slowly, leaned against the gate, and let out a soft sound. Not a growl, not a cry, just breath, with weight behind it. And for the first time, the child reached through the bars with both arms and hugged him. It was quick, gentle, the kind of hug you give a friend you trust not to hurt you. The bobcat stood there, head bowed, unmoving. That morning, the staff stopped pretending this was temporary. They began cleaning the kennel differently. Quietly, gently. One woman even placed a folded blanket in the corner after the boy left. There were no decisions, no meetings, only this unspoken truth settling into every corner of the shelter. This child had become the only reason the animal was still alive. And somehow, the animal seemed to know it. By midweek, something odd began to happen. Each time the child arrived, the bobcat would be sitting in the same exact position. Not just near the bars, but with one paw outstretched, as if waiting for something. And always his head would be turned toward the left wall of the room. Not at the boy, not at the food bowl, but toward a blank wall where nothing existed. Just concrete and shadow. At first, no one thought anything of it. But it happened again. And again. Even when no one was in the room. Even when the boy came in from the opposite side. The bobcat would turn, stare, wait. Only then would he settle beside the boy. One staffer, curious, placed a camera in the corner overnight. What it captured was strange. Not dramatic, but unsettling in a way that lived under the skin. Around 3 a.m., the bobcat woke from sleep. He sat up and walked, limping, to that same wall. Then sat there, staring, for over an hour. No sound, no movement, just watching. The footage was shown to the others, then quietly deleted. No one spoke about it again. The next morning, the boy brought something new. A shoelace, bright red, frayed at one end. He dragged it across the floor like a snake, letting the bobcat swat at it with his good paw. The room filled with soft sounds, claws tapping concrete, the boy's quiet laughter, the shuffle of joy that didn't need words. That same day, the shelter received a call from a regional officer. There had been a mistake in classification. The bobcat, originally tagged as non-releasable due to aggression, was now cleared as potentially manageable. His fate had changed, because someone, somewhere, had reviewed the reports and seen something different. There was talk now of transfer, of medical evaluation, of next steps, but no one knew how to tell the boy. And more than that, no one knew what the Bobcat would do, because something had begun to shift, not just in his wounds, which were healing, not just in his eyes, which now held light instead of pain, but in the way he waited. Every evening, like clockwork, 15 minutes before the boy arrived, the Bobcat would rise, limp to the corner of the kennel, and sit facing that same wall, watching, waiting, as if sensing something no one else could see. And each time the boy appeared, the animal would slowly turn, lower his body, and greet him with a bowed head. No words, no tricks, just breath and rhythm, and a question hanging quietly in the air. What does he see over there? Before I even come, no one dared ask it aloud. They came on a Thursday. 2 men in plain uniforms, carrying clipboards and metal crates, speaking in soft, official tones. They said words like relocation, sanctuary, and approved site. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't touch the child. But they looked at the Bobcat like he wasn't alive yet. Just a file with weight and muscle and teeth. The boy had been drawing when they arrived. A crooked picture of the Bobcat lying under a tree with red apples falling around him. He stopped when the strangers stepped inside. The Bobcat didn't move, but his eyes never left them. One man knelt near the kennel, tapping a latch, checking the hinge. The other stood back, reading a line from the intake sheet aloud. Transfer approved. Immediate. The boy didn't speak. He only reached into his pocket and took out something small. A smooth stone, white oval, the size of a robin's egg, still damp from wherever he'd found it. He placed it gently through the bars beside the Bobcat's paw. And then he stood up. Not angry, not scared, just still. The Bobcat looked down at the stone, then up at the boy. And for the first time since the day they met, he let out a low, rumbling sound. Not a growl, not a warning, something softer, like an exhale that had waited weeks to be heard. The 2 men paused. One of them glanced at the shelter worker, unsure. But the boy didn't stop them. He walked out of the room, hoodie hanging off one shoulder, shoes in hand, and sat on the front steps in the fading afternoon light. Inside, the Bobcat didn't resist, didn't hiss, didn't fight. But when they opened the gate, he did not move. He stared at the stone, then back toward the door. And only after several long minutes, when the boy was no longer visible, did he rise, limp forward, and enter the crate without a sound. It rained that night. Not a storm, not heavy, just a steady, curtain-like fall that turned the sky pale and the windows into mirrors. The shelter was quiet. The room where they'd met, empty. Blanket folded. Crate cleaned. Only the boy's drawings remained, taped to the wall by a quiet hand earlier that evening. A Bobcat with crooked legs and a child with round eyes holding something glowing in his palm. In the corner, near the kennel wall, a dark smudge remained where the Bobcat had always sat, facing the left side. Watching, waiting. The staff didn't speak much that week. The child returned 3 days later. He didn't run inside, didn't ask questions. He just stood in the hallway, staring at the empty space. Someone handed him the stone. It was warm, as if it had never left the Bobcat's paw. The sanctuary was in the mountains. High, remote, cold in the mornings. The kind of place where fog slept in the treetops, and animals that couldn't go back to the wild were given space to pretend they had. The Bobcat was given a half-acre run. Fenced but quiet. It had rocks, logs, trees. Everything a brochure might promise. But no child. The first day he paced. The second day, he slept by the wall. By the third day, the staff noticed something odd. He wouldn't eat unless someone placed the bowl in the far left corner of the enclosure. beneath the shade of a crooked pine tree. It wasn't about the food. It was about direction. He was waiting for something, or someone, and one cold morning, just before sunup, he did something that none of the handlers could explain. He carried the white stone across the enclosure in his teeth, and placed it beneath that tree, facing outward, toward the edge of the fence, then sat down beside it, and waited. He stayed there until night, not pacing, not hunting, just watching the tree line. The staff made notes. Unusual orientation, fixation pattern, possible behavioral trauma. But none of them could touch it, because every evening, before dusk, the bobcat would return to that same place, lower his body into the dirt beside the stone, and remain there, eyes scanning the woods as if he expected the world to bring him back something it had taken away. Back in town, the child had stopped speaking, not in a dramatic way, just less. He still played in the backyard, still ate toast with too much jelly, still fell asleep with his thumb tucked under his cheek. But the world around him felt thinner. He no longer asked to visit the shelter, no longer touched the drawings taped to his bedroom wall. Only once did he say anything. He was watching rain slide down the window when he whispered, "He left it behind for me. The part that hurts." His mother didn't know what he meant. Then, 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. The bobcat disappeared, not escaped. The gate was still locked, the fencing intact. But during a routine morning check, he wasn't in his enclosure. Not under the tree. Not near the fence. Gone. Search teams were called. Tracks were found outside the perimeter. No breaks in the barrier. Only the stone remained, clean, centered, and still warm from where he'd last been curled around it. No one had answers. They assumed a breach, filed the reports, closed the case. But one of the staff, an older woman who rarely spoke, said something strange before she left for the evening. "He wasn't escaping," she murmured. "He was returning." That night, the boy woke up crying, not loudly, just soft, wet sobs into the pillow, the kind that have no beginning and no explanation. And in the morning, the phone rang. It was the shelter. A report had come in from a local farmer near the woods. A strange animal had been seen curled beside a child's rain jacket, left outside days ago and forgotten on a porch bench. The farmer had tried to approach, but the creature vanished into the trees. Left behind was a muddy print, a paw, twisted at the wrist, and beside it, a single red shoelace. It was late afternoon when the bobcat returned, not to the shelter, not to the sanctuary, but to the edge of the woods behind the child's house. The boy was in the backyard, sitting in the dirt beside a small pile of objects, a red shoelace, the stone, and a piece of toast wrapped in a napkin. He hadn't spoken that day. He hadn't moved much, but his eyes were fixed on the tree line, as if he already knew. And then, the wind shifted. No sound, no warning, just movement, barely visible. A shadow between branches, a soft crunch of leaves, and then eyes, gold, familiar, locked onto his. The bobcat stepped forward, limping but whole, fur matted from rain, ribs showing, but no longer sharp. His breath was quiet now, slow, deliberate. He walked past the edge of the yard, past the line where most animals stop, and kept walking, one cautious step after another, until he reached the boy's feet. Then he lay down, not collapsed, lay, with purpose, head tucked toward the boy's knee, eyes half closed. The child didn't cry, didn't laugh. He simply reached forward and placed the stone back between them. There were no adults in the yard, no camera, no cage, just a child, a bobcat, and silence. They stayed that way until the sun sank low, turning the sky to honey and gold. Birds whispered in the trees. The air thickened with that soft stillness only dusk knows how to carry. Then the boy stood up. He turned, walked inside the house, and left the back door open. The bobcat didn't follow. He stood slowly, shook his fur, and turned toward the forest. But before vanishing into the trees, he paused, one last time, and looked back. Not for permission, not for fear, but acknowledgement. Then he was gone. Weeks passed. Sometimes, at night, the boy would leave out an old t-shirt or a crumpled napkin with cookie crumbs. Sometimes they disappeared. Sometimes they didn't. But one thing remained: a single red shoelace, tied gently around the lowest branch of the crooked tree in the backyard. And beneath it, a paw print, always fresh, always facing the house.